Well, we are going to move. I'd like to move back. And if we could, everybody move to here. That way we're not so spread out. We can all hear. I don't know. No. Okay. Binko is not allowed past this row. Sorry, Bo. Pass these out for me. Whoever wants a book. I've got more books if well, tonight'll be simple then. If it wasn't for bad decisions, I wouldn't have any decisions at all, huh? I do. Yeah, they're right up in that view right there. Who needs a book? Oh, I've got plenty. Yeah, no, I've got plenty. Okay. Of course, as we know, we got a men's class, ladies class, this class, and kind of doing it a little different than we normally do. We're going to have, there'll be 4 different teachers in here. One of them, Toby Sublet, will teach a couple of weeks, and Sammy Tyler will teach a couple of weeks, and then you'll get Bruce. You may get me again. I don't know. You know Bruce. But that way it gives a little exposure to Toby and Sammy and teaching this auditorium class. As those that have taught out here, I mean, it's a lot to teach any quarter, and it's a lot to teach out here. So kind of break Toby and Sammy in a little gentle. Then some of us got broke into. Ours was like, here's your quarter, go. But anyway, and so what we decided is to use a book that we didn't have to go in chronological order of lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3. And Bruce actually come up with this book, and I think it's a good book to use for this. It's Minor Bible Characters. And so we can skip around. I'm going to start with lesson 1. And I think I'm going to do lesson 8 next week if I get done in here with lesson 1. Sammy's got a couple. He's going to pick 2 of them. Toby's going to pick 2, but we can jump around with it. It's not going to affect anything. If somebody misses one class, they won't miss out on anything if they're back the next week. So, no, lesson 1 tonight. Yeah, hopefully lesson 8 next Wednesday. But before we start, let's start out with a word of prayer. Our God and our Father, we humbly approach your throne, thanking you for this day that you've given us, the many blessings that you've provided for us. Father, we're thankful that you have given us another day that we may worship you. Father, we pray that as we start our class this quarter, that we may open our minds and open our hearts to your word, that we may take things that were taught, that we learn, and we may apply them to our lives, that we may share your word and our example with others, that we may bring others unto you. Father, be with us as teachers, that we may have a ready recollection of the things that we study. May we be able to present them in a way that is easily understood. Father, may we never take your grace and your love for granted. All these things we pray in your Son's name. Amen. Okay, so lesson 1 is on Lot. how to make a terrible decision. No, that's why I picked this lesson. I think I don't need to know how to, but hopefully what we can take from this lesson is that we need to think about our decisions more, and that there are consequences to our decisions, and big decisions, which Lot made. His first big decision, turned out to be a not so great one in the long run. So, we all make decisions every day about things, minimal things, where we're going to go to lunch, what we're going to wear. That's usually not a big deal. We have a lot of pressure on us from the world about what we wear, what's in style, what's okay, what's modest, what's acceptable. Stephen, will you turn to Romans 12, read verses 1 and 2? Roger, will you read 2 Corinthians 6, 14 through 18? And Richard, would you take 1 Peter 2 and verse 11? We'll start with Romans chapter 12 and verse 1 and 2. Stephen, go ahead. Okay, 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 14 through 18. Okay, 1 Peter 2, verse 11.
Beloved, I beg you as sojourners.
Okay, so, we're clearly warned in the Bible to abstain from those things that can get us into trouble. Especially, Romans 12 and verse 2 says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. 2 Corinthians, I like that, where it says, do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers, for what fellowship has righteousness with lawlessness, and what communion has light with darkness. So, we're warned about this. We're told that, basically, if you go down this road, there are consequences. There are troubles by making these decisions. So it's something that we don't, personally, I've gone down this and not thought anything about it. As a parent, it's hard to convince our children that this isn't, we've been here, we've done that. What you're doing is, when you're treading on thin ice. I can still remember being a teenager and thinking I knew it all and my parents were stupid. And I didn't really come out and say that, but in my mind, I knew what I was doing. I knew what had it handled. Hindsight 2020, I didn't have anything handled. The world had me. And so we'll get hopefully this later on, we'll stick with what God has told us, God has warned us about. We'll come out a little less singed out of the fire if we'll do what the Bible teaches. We don't have a lot of choices when it comes to where we work, where we live, as far as picking our neighbors, do we? Well, we can't all have the great Mike Binko neighbor, you know. I mean, you can, and I know people have. They move, if they are in a house, they've got bad neighbors that come in, hang up and leave. Harder to do, but we can't say, oh, I'm sorry, you can't buy this house. You're not a good influence on me. Please pick somewhere else. You can't go to coworkers and say, I'm sorry, you're going to have to quit your job because you're not a good influence on me, and I'm keeping my job and you can't. But we have to keep in mind that warning that we don't need to conform to the world, and it's easy in the workplace especially. Now at your house you can be recluse and stay away from your neighbors and not have that much. They can't have that much effect on you. At work, it's easier for your coworkers to have a lot of effect on you, can't it? I mean, it's easy because your work, if you're not isolated from other people, I mean, you're going to hear what they have to say, good or bad. But we just have to keep in mind that we still have to make the right decision. Yep. 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 Yeah. Some people, I mean, I agree. There are some that's like, he's too much of a goody two shoes. We'll fix that, and a lot of times I don't think that they intentionally do that. There are some that do, but I think a lot of times they don't have the conscience that anything's wrong with it, and that's just how they live. It's who they are. As Psalm 73, that's the coat that they wear is, evil language and just bad behavior. But so with Lot, we know the story. I mean, he made a bad decision, thought it was a good one, and could have been, I think, had he done what he should have. But the first part of this book talks about that Lot had so much in his favor. What did he have? What did he have going for him? Yeah. Yes. I mean, in Genesis chapter 12, beginning in verse 4, it says, So Abram departed as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Then Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their possessions that they had gathered, and the people whom they had acquired in Haran, and they departed to go to the land of Canaan. So Abraham graciously took him. Why did he take Lot? Did Lot have anything there? Yes. Yep. Yeah. Yes. Did not look that up. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Roger. Yeah, I didn't even think to look at, because when you think about Abraham took Lot with him, you think, well, Lot was a younger person and needed to go with him. I mean, with Abraham being 75, Lot could have been, 40. Yes. It was cultural. Families stuck together. I mean, and if one decided to move, the whole clan went with them. You know, I mean, and that happened even within the last 100 years. Yeah. And it may not have been. It may have been, son, you're going with me. I told your dad I'd take care of you, kind of thing. So Abraham was Lot's uncle, and how was Abraham's relationship with God? I mean, he was called a friend. In James chapter 2 and verse 23, the writer says that he was called a friend of God. Who else wasn't called a friend of God, but who else had that type of, David, Moses. I mean, so you've got one of those things you look at, I mean, and we've all seen this. We've seen people that had great parents that were Christians or was around, family that were Christians. And, I mean, strong, faithful Christians. And yet they made a bad decision or just decided to depart. So that doesn't always mean, I mean, we say this all the time, we can't say Daryl's the reason that I'm a Christian, I'm saved. It all falls back on our own shoulders. We live or die by the choices that we make in life. So, was Lot, we'll kind of jump ahead, was Lot a carnal man? Yeah. Yeah. 2 Peter chapter 2. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 7 and 8 is where it says that. We'll start back at verse 4. It says, "For if God did not spare the angels who sinned, but cast them down to hell and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved for judgment, and did not spare the ancient world, but saved Noah, one of 8 people, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood on the world of the ungodly, and turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them to destruction, making them an example to those who afterward would live ungodly, and delivered righteous Lot, who was oppressed by the filthy conduct of the wicked. For that righteous man, dwelling among them, tormented his righteous soul from day to day by seeing and hearing their lawless deeds." So, Lot was not, he wasn't a carnal, ungodly man. He was just living in a city that was. And, that's a fine line to walk. Oh, yeah. You just like Dino, you asked a question I didn't think about. In the book it says he knew right from wrong. He was taught that either by his father or that Abraham taught him that. But he knew right from wrong. There in 2 Peter, he had the right attitude, but he still made that wrong decision. He left that up to what looked good. The grass was greener, literally. In this case, the grass was greener where he was wanting to go. Why did he do that? Why did it come to that point? We all come to this. Yeah. We all come to that. I mean, in life, and sometimes it's just like this. It's between families. You come to that turning point of we want you to live this way, or this is the way we're living. Well, I know that's not right. You got to make that decision. Was the decision to take his herdsmen and his herds, his cattle, his whatever other flock he had, was it wrong to look over there and say, hey, that's good ground. It's got plenty of water. You know, it's yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, what it talks about, I mean, was Lot a wealthy man? Was Abraham a wealthy man? Okay, how was their wealth defined? By the size of their, yeah. I mean, it wasn't necessarily, how many servants they had and they had a big tent or house. I mean, their flock, their cows, horses, donkeys, mules, whatever they had, sheep, the more they had, the wealthier a person was. Well, I mean, if to do it right, to be a good shepherd, what are you looking for? Are you looking for that rocky, hilly ground to take your herd? I mean, that's not, to me, that's not where you want them to be. You're looking for that land that's flourishing, that's green. That's where you want to go. Like Roger said, though, he didn't really investigate too much. Yep. 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 Genesis chapter 13 and verse 11, where it says he chose the plain of Jordan. And I mean, Abraham did the right thing, rather than the two families being in conflict, and eventually could separate to the point where there was no interaction ever. I mean, he decided to, hey, let's look at where is that at? Chapter 13, verse 7. It says, there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. The Canaanites and the Perizzites then dwelt in the land. And so Abraham said to Lot, please let there be no strife between you and me, and between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are brethren. Is not the whole land before you? Please separate from me. If you take the left, then I'll take the right. Or if you go to the right, then I'll go to the left. It says, and Lot lifted his eyes and saw all the plain of Jordan, that it was very well watered everywhere before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as you go towards Zoar. So then Lot chose for himself all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated from each other. So from a business standpoint, and that was a good decision. It says it was well watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. So Abraham dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent even as far as Sodom. Was he in Sodom? The way it's written, I think at first, at least, he may have just been right there on the edge. That was, had he stayed there, things might have turned out a little bit better. Yep. Right. Um, well, and that's, that's what when I was reading through this and studying, I mean, it poses the question, had Lot said, I think I'll go to the west, Abraham would have went to the east. Abraham was a strong man in the faith. He was faithful to God. But it's what ifs, Mike. Right. Yeah. Or he may have pitched his tent in a different place, not by Sodom. Yeah. Yeah, at some point, we don't know time frame between when he went to the plains and but it seems like, and it may have been one of those things where, I mean, for those of us that have been in Conway for a long period of time, many can probably remember when over in west side of town was not part of Conway proper. It was, that was the boonies, so to speak. Do what? That's right. That's right. I can vaguely remember it went past Hogan. I've not been here but a little over 22 years. But as things grow, the city has grown. Same way with Sodom. Sodom, when he first moved, he may have been on the outskirts. And as time went on, Sodom encompassed Lot. Who knows? And really, it doesn't matter. We know that he could have kept moving farther out when Sodom moved. Psalms 1, again in verse 1, it says, "Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel or the advice of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful." What's it mean to walk not in the counsel of the ungodly? The way of life. It's not literally meaning walking around. It means how we live our life. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. There was there was probably yeah. Yeah, not just a little bit. Yeah, no, you're right. So, um, his decision was made again from a business standpoint, not a bad one. And I look at this in our lives. How many times have we heard of people say, "Man, I've got this great job opportunity. It's out in here, and man, I'm getting good money. Gonna have a nice house." And what are they usually forgetting? God. You ask them, say, "Oh, hey, that's great. have you been out there and you looked at it and, oh yeah, I've been out there and everything looks good and nice neighborhood and, seems like the neighbors are nice. And I said, well, have you found a congregation? They said, well, no, there's not really one. There's not a good one close. I mean, that ought to be one of the first things that you look at is where can I go? And I'm not discouraging from taking a job somewhere else and moving. I mean, that's part of life. But when you make that, to me, that's the same type of decision that Lot made. Man, I'm going down here, the grass is greener, things are gonna be good, I'll flourish, I'll get, more cattle, I'll have all this more wealth. Where's God at? It's hard. Yes, Daryl. Oh, it's hard. It would be for me. It's hard to wake up and say, man, I've got a hour and a half drive to get to worship services and be faithful about going. I mean, I'm not saying you gotta live, right next door, but picking somewhere that you're gonna have to drive an hour and a half, it'll be easier on mornings, and we all have these, where you wake up and you're like, I just don't feel the best in the world. And then you tack on, I got 3 hours of my day is gonna be spent in the car, and I'm not feeling the best. I think I can stay home today. Well, that's your crutch then. So, Daryl. Yep. 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 Mhm. And that makes it made an impression on you. I mean, I growing up, my dad might not gone to services every time, because as y'all know, he wasn't a Christian until about 3 years ago. But he always, no matter where we went, made sure of where the church was. And, or if mom was sick, he always made sure that we went. I mean, that just made a big impression on me. Looking back, at the time I didn't think nothing of it. Then we went to church. It was part of the deal. You take a trip, we went to church. But looking back, I think, that really it ties into me doing that now. We tried. Of course, it was harder back then when you didn't have a phone to say, find this street. He would ask. I remember once we were somewhere out west, and he didn't know where the church was, and he asked somebody. He said, hey, is there a Church of Christ here in town? The guy goes, yeah, see that down there, that steeple? He said, that's it. Dad's like, okay, thanks. We drive down there, and it was not a church of any kind. I don't know what it was. I don't remember that, but I just remember it wasn't a church. And Dad felt bad.
That's what you.
Yeah.
And Earl's family.
Yeah. Yeah.
My wife and I somewhere.
Yep. You make those arrangements ahead of time. That way, you're not making that bad decision of, well, what's that tell our kids when we don't look for where the church is, where you're going to stay? Now, and we've all done this too. Think we know where the church is. We drive and drive and drive and never find it. Tried. I don't think, my assumption, not judge, I'm not the final judge, but I think God knows your heart and knows if we're really trying or not. That's frustrating though, is to have an address and you just can't find it, but yeah. That's right. Yeah, you don't have a choice on that. Yeah. Yeah, you better make preparations for attending, and like I said, like we said, it affects our children later on down the road. I mean, Daryl and I both are talking about it, and I know others have had this thing happen too when you were kids. It makes an impression on our children as to what our priorities are. Our priorities don't always need to be the biggest, the best, living up to the Joneses. It needs to be, where can I go to help me make the right decisions? Because that's the thing. Lot took himself away. We talked about what he had. He had Abraham, a friend of God. I mean, at that time, it didn't get any better. Tom? Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the other thing is, like I said, when we take ourselves away from strong, faithful Christians, we take away any hope of, we can't do, I'm going to be honest, we can't do it on our own. I need the encouragement, I need the edification of my family. I've got blood family, and then I've got this family. And without this family, the encouragement over the years that I've had, and the encouragement that everybody has gotten from each other. And when you distance yourself from that, maybe it's just me. You're asking for trouble. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, if you allow yourself, and I say this about our college kids, if you allow yourself to be encompassed within our family, somebody is liable to take you by the ear if you start straying and say, hey, you're not doing right, you need to straighten back up. So, all right, so next week, I didn't figure I'd get far in this. We'll talk more about Lot, and maybe going into lesson 8 about Judas. So, thank y'all.